6:06, and I'll call the meeting to order. We start with the reading of the vision statement for the Ashland Public Schools, which is, the Ashland Public Schools is a forward-thinking district that cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV. So we've done our call to order. Opening procedures, we'll review the agenda and adoption. It's a relatively short one. First, we'll have some public comment if there is anybody. We have a presentation from the Student Advisory Council. Administrative items will include the Minda School Nature Trail and a proposal from the Community Preservation Committee. A presentation from the Clocker Club, the Assistant Superintendent's update, warrant approvals, approval of minutes from May 3rd and May 18th, acceptance of gifts and donations, member updates, and any action items. Although we don't have anybody remote, we'll just make sure everybody is all right with the agenda. Paul?
Yes.
Aaron?
Yes.
Tina?
Yep.
And of course, I'm good too. So first order of business is public comment. Is there anybody here from the public who wishes to make a comment? And is there nobody on Zoom? Okay, thank you. And I assume Lori is not on Zoom, correct?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our first item then is the presentation of the Student Advisory Council. Please come on up and introduce yourselves.
Hi, my name is Adam Rosoff.
Hi, I'm Rugvid.
And I'm Emily.
Hi. What do you got for us tonight?
So this week is senior week. So the seniors have, actually last Friday, they had their reality fair, which teaches them about financial literacy. And then Tuesday they had the senior banquet. Yesterday, Wednesday, they had their boat cruise. Today they went to Six Flags. And then tomorrow is class day. So it's kind of like a graduation rehearsal where they receive their scholarships. And then Sunday is the actual graduation. Also, sports coming to an end. Playoffs are starting. Both boys and girls tennis teams, both boys and girls lacrosse teams, and the baseball team made the playoffs. Finals are also coming up, starting the 13th.
A little more. You're fine, Adam, keep going.
On April 14th, Ashland held the Special Olympics. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Hi. So, besides the SATs, all the standardized testing is basically done. AP exams took place from May 1st to May 11th, and on June 6th and 7th, the freshmen and sophomores took their MCAS. Aside from exams, the AHS is now holding class officer elections for all grades. Sign-ups and endorsements were due May 26th, and speeches will take place on Monday, June 5th. And finally, the AHS club seemed to be doing good on a competitive basis. The robotics club won the Judge's Choice Award, and the Model UN club won 4 awards at the Weymouth Model UN conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
The other week was the class of 24's prom at Lakeview Pavilion, and despite the Taylor Swift concert, there was almost no traffic, which was good. And everyone had a good time at Grand March, showing off their dresses and suits and taking pictures for the parents. The other week we had a guest speaker, Chris Herron, come to the school, who was a former basketball player whose career got derailed by drugs and alcohol. So he came to speak to the juniors and seniors about substance abuse and how to not make mistakes that'll derail your future, which was good. And then the other week was Academic Awards Night, where students got recognized for different classes that they've done well in, and as well as some scholarships were given out to juniors and seniors by the deans and the principal. And then the seniors also had another guest speaker, Matt Jacques, who came in to talk about financial literacy, which kind of worked well with the reality fair that happened last week.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. Great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you coming.
I just want to thank you very quickly for the work you've done for us. We have a little little thank you note for the three of you, and we'll get the other two folks theirs in a little bit, okay? So, Emily, here you go. Rugvid, Adam. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming in. You too. Thanks, Kelly. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Mendez School Nature Trail Community Preservation Committee. Aaron, why don't you come on up and introduce yourself and let us know what you've got.
Aaron Ladd, Chair of the Community Preservation Committee, live at 153 Pleasant Street. I'd like to just take a quick sec of, I haven't been in front of this board before, and just a quick community preservation update of where we've been and where we're going. The Mendez Trail is kind of a specific thing there. But a quick thing about community preservation, we're currently 20 years deep into community preservation. We have everything from we're paying off bonds at the high school for athletic fields that were done a long time ago, to we're doing current projects of renovating scoreboards at the middle school. So community preservation is entitled with doing open space, recreation, historic preservation, and affordable housing. I don't think affordable housing or historic preservation are going to touch you guys, but open space and recreation definitely do. And a quick update of kind of where CPC is headed. So for the past 20 years, we've fluctuated a budget between $1 and $2 million in savings. Over the next 3 to 5 years, because we'll be paying off bonds at the high school, Oak Street, and a few others, our balance will start growing towards $4 to $5 million. We continue to get applications and projects. But I think it's important to go before those who do apply and those reach out to those in the sense that I'm not really going to apply for a thing like Mendez. You would kind of apply back to me. So it's a little awkward that like I'm kind of giving you an idea that you'd give back to me, but I'll kind of
So
talk
you're
about
saying
that.
we should knock?
That's really kind of what I'm referring to.
He's been telling me to knock for a while, but
I guess the way to think of it is we're a bank, and the more applicants we have, the better we have to weigh things. Hopkinton, I think, is a good example of this past year. They had, I think, 3 or 4 multi-million-dollar projects proposed all at the same time, and they weren't able to fund a playground expansion project at the Marathon School because everybody came at once. So I think it's helpful to line up projects, get things in advance, see what's coming, and have those queued up so that we know, all right, here's our plan, here's how things are going. So we spoke with town, but it's good to hear from committees like this to hear what's potentially down the road. So that's a little background about CPC. That's a little background about where we are as a committee. That's a little background about where the committee's going in the future. As a quick note, we're like any other group, we're a 9-member board. We meet monthly. We present before town meeting. You see our warrant article. That's a consent article that pays our bonds, but then we have application period. So the specific thing in front of you that we're kind of, as an idea, is as we think of projects, the Mendez School has extensive land behind it. And this idea comes from me personally of I grew up next to a school that had a nature trail experience next to the elementary school. And I worked in Wellesley next to the Needham Elementary School who did this same type of CPC project. I'm going to draw a blank on the elementary school name, but there's a school in Needham that basically built a half-mile, 3/4 of a mile walking trail through the woods that had little breakout spaces for teaching. It had a boardwalk area. It had like exhibit areas. So there was basically biology class, history class, et cetera, in the woods, as well as like a half a mile, 3/4 mile walking trail that went in conjunction with a new school and everything that went with that. So Mendez, the property behind it, has an existing trail that obviously needs a little bit of work, but would be an option to make that type of scenario. So when I saw the project for Mendez going on, I was like looking at the back of it and saying, hey, could we connect trails to this? It seems to fit in with the purview of CPC. It was an idea. And so it was like, who owns the property? How do people apply? Go through the concepts of that. So I know I'm here to talk about a Mendez School walking trail, but I think it's more of a concept of relaying what CPC's mission is. And then here's an example of like, oh, this might be an option for something in the future, speaking with others on the committee of like, hey, is this something that the committee would want to do at one point? But it's also hearing like, hey, are there other playgrounds that are coming for you guys in the next couple of years of like projects and everything that goes with that. So I've rambled here for a couple minutes, but perhaps it's best to hear that and then give me questions or feedback or thoughts on that of just, again, ideas, concepts, and overall committee structure.
Sure. Thanks, Aaron.
And to give you background,
Yeah.
so Aaron has been touching base with me for, I don't know, a year and a half now on this. He brought the idea forward earlier about Mendez, and I'm like, hold on, we've got a lot going on, and so I think it's a good idea. I think the challenge here is going to be who's driving, right? I think that'll be the big challenge here, right? So a lot of things like this would be something Chris's team or John's team would do, but obviously they're pretty stretched with the other things we're doing. But perhaps there's other capacities in other places in town that could help lead this, right? But essentially, when we built, we did take away a portion of that trail system, or at least the access to one portion of it. And now it'd be, once we get that done, we've obviously had things that go back there, Spooky Run and different things. And when I spoke with Aaron, that's one of the things about whatever we do, let's be holistic and including the PE teachers and different people to say what's going to work for both that neighborhood back there, the Fisk Good Now, that neighborhood back there, but also for our curriculum and how we access that back there. We're working on some things about how we would cross the if you remember, there's a swale that goes across that side of the property, things like that. So that's kind of the background. We've been ping-ponging back and forth, and I've been kind of giving the Heisman a bunch while we've been doing the project. But now we'll, in the next year or so, we'll be at a point where we can start to entertain doing this. And I think the next things are, is it something we want to pursue, and then how would we pursue it, and who would kind of be the sponsor of it, if you will, right?
Yeah. So Paul, do you have a sense from, I mean, you know that property probably better than anybody else in the room, I think, at this point. Is this something that we're already at a point where you can start to envision it, or are we really kind of at a concept phase of, hey, let's have a conversation about whether this is something that would be beneficial to the Mendez community?
I think we're at a phase now where we can start. If we had somebody that raised their hand and said, I can lead this, and there was funding, I think we're at a point where we can start planning and looking at doing it, right? So our substantial completion date for the building proper is July 17th. This summer we're getting, the building ready to be open. And at that point, we're moving to the front of the site, right? So we're going to be working there. And now it's not as big of a coordination thing if we want to start to look at what happens behind the school. Until we shift and take that security fencing away, there's really not a time to coordinate. Once we now remove that security fencing on the first phase of the project, so now's the time to start that planning. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if there are other questions, and I'll get one for Aaron.
Yeah, it's kind of along the lines of who's going to manage, how do we put it together, that piece. Is this something that we would bring the idea to you and you guys would execute? Is it something that we would bring the idea to you, if you agree with it, you would help fund it, but whoever, we would need, in essence, a project manager to design, implement, that type of thing? I guess understanding your role versus our role as an applicant and what that would look like.
So using the scoreboard example, I'll talk in specifics and I'll talk in concept. In specifics, in the town of Ashland, the project management role is taken on by the applicant per se, and they manage that. So in this case, town staff does the work of it per se. So we're a bank. So you come to us and say, hey, we have an idea. We approve funds. CPC funds can be approved for the planning. So you can say, hey, can we have $10,000 to hire a landscape architect to design this? And then can we have $100,000 to build it? So you can ask for money in funds of like, hey, you don't have to fund the estimating costs or architect costs. You can ask for that for this. So you can ask for planning funds, and then you can ask for execution funds. The concept thing I say of the CPC in general, larger towns like the city of Boston has CPC. They have full-time project manager staff for their CPC. So it's a little bit more about the size of a town related to the number of projects they have going on and how it relates to staff budgets, and that's kind of not our purview. But as far as like how we can help in planning phases, and then not in the project management part, but funding-wise, we can fund planning and we can fund execution. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. That's helpful to understand.
And that goes with kind of, again, any project. Speak of this as a specific example, but again, other projects like that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, somebody would have to be the applicant, because obviously he's chair and voting member of the funding mechanism, so he can't be an applicant. That would be
right.
The overall concept is the applicant is the landowner. So you know,
Right.
So,
the scoreboards, the school owns the land, so they
Right.
apply, you know, and our other applicants, it's the land owner who applies for CPC funds. If they're not, then there's grant agreements and restrictions that go on properties, and then it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a great idea. I think it will likely involve an internal conversation of who has the capacity to be that project manager and what that would look like, but, yeah.
I mean, the other option is we hire a project manager, and it sounds like that is one of the planning.
Could be a piece of it.
Can be used for that funding as well, you know, and so, I mean.
I don't know the history, but again, CPC funds were used to do all the athletic fields at the high school.
Okay.
So, like, obviously, I don't think the school board project managed that out. So,
Sure.
like, you know, you guys have been applicants for bigger projects in the past type of thing.
Did you have anything, Aaron?
Well, I was just gonna ask, like, Chris, because you've worked with them on the.
Your mic.
like- Sorry, you've worked with him on the scoreboards, like, is there a preference between yourself and Jim of, like, having you guys, potentially be, or facilities be the PMs, or?
I don't think there's a preference. I think one of the things is a subject matter expert on knowing what the conceptual layout and design looks like, and then the execution on it. I mean, depending on how big of a project we're talking about, is something that, you know, like the school boards, we bid out, we manage, we're able to manage that internally with fine. So I think it just depends on the size and scope, but getting that subject matter expert on showing us what these designs look like and layouts and things like that, that's what we would need some assistance with.
Are there specific timelines that you guys have in terms of when to apply, or is it kind of a rolling process?
Again, twice a year, town meeting, work backs 3-4 months, et cetera. So,
Okay.
you know, fall town meeting is now. Like, we're having, next week, we're having an applicant up before us before fall town meeting.
Okay.
But if it's not then it's the next town meeting type of thing. So that's where I get in the queue of, like, again, I'm trying to avoid the 7 applicants coming to us at once and then
Sure.
not being able to fund everything.
So the question I have for you, I was going to ask Tina's as well, but the question I have for you is sort of where is the delineation or overlap between what you can fund and what the town might fund through capital, right? So you used an example of fields, right? And so if we use CPC funds to build all the fields, I assume if we had to do maintenance on those or replace them, CPC funds could be used. But sometimes that's also comes out of capital funding for the town. So I don't know if you could speak to that at all.
Again, I'll talk in specifics and I'll talk in concepts now. In specifics, CPC is really intended to be new and capital of, like, building something. It's not intended to be maintenance. So, for example, if you came to us and said, we want to replace the turf field at the high school, CPC can't be used for that. It's
Okay.
considered maintenance, it's considered replacement, et cetera. So there's a little bit about the legality of what CPC funds can be used for.
Sure.
The question of what's capital versus what's CPC, that's a much trickier question that I don't feel comfortable answering, because that's a little bit,
Okay,
you know,
fair
how
enough.
the town budget
Yeah.
figures things out. But I think the purpose of CPC is to do things you couldn't do otherwise, right? You know, that it's like, hey, you know, we're stretching our budgets, we're stretched here with capital projects, but this is a great idea. Oh, that's what CPC should be used for. You know, if you look at the list of what's approved over projects, it's really for, like, those type of things that are great, but we just don't know where we'd fund it from. And that's what CPC is really intended to be for, so that it's something that is long-term lasting. You hear the categories, right? Historic preservation, something that didn't always get funded for a long time. Recreation, something that didn't always get funded for a long time. Or acquiring open space, something that didn't have a bucket as well. So the purpose of CPC is really doing things that aren't always in the budget otherwise, but are good ideas, and then they fit in within a category of usually something new. So in this case,
Newer enhancements. So I think we've even talked about, like, a playground over at Warren and putting in a different surface underneath it or something like that. It wouldn't be replacing, it wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, hey, that thing's, but it's a change, right?
Correct.
If it's a change, then it would probably be okay to fund. Is that accurate?
yeah, I mean, the CPC would do better if it's like, all right, we're going to build a new playground. That's usually easier. I'd have to look at the kind of, like, if we change the surface of it kind of thing.
So it seems like the takeaway for us is be aware of this resource of their projects that we were thinking of. One could be the example of the Mendez Trail. Let's think about that as a resource and consider being an applicant. And then I think the second question, more specific to the Mendez, is that something we'd want to explore and maybe to have a further conversation among the board when Jim is here as well, and talk about, how would we want to go about exploring that? Is it even something that we'd use, right? I mean, I know at the middle school, and it sounds like it was a CPC project, but we have that installation that's out by center field of the baseball, but up in the woods, sort of towards my house. I don't know if it's ever used, right? And originally that was supposed to be something that also would be accessible and utilized in a constructive manner. I think unfortunately it's been subject to vandalism. Right? I think it's a Native American memorial of some sort out there. And I don't know that it ever got used the way it was supposed to be. And I'm not sure that would have been, that wasn't our decision making. It wasn't the goal at the time. It's more somebody coming to us. But just thinking about if there's something, I don't want to go to you, make an application if we don't have a plan to use it and make sure it's worth the money for the community.
And Aaron, are there any, say you do a project, right? Are there any stipulations that go along with that when you use CPC funds, like there is for other things and other funding mechanisms that we've used in the past? Whether it be even, for example, if we're doing MSBA things and we've done a roof, but it's only been 15 years and we're doing something that's going to replace that, they actually, if next time we go to them for funding, they prorate that and say, okay, because of the life expectancy. What are the stipulations in using CPC funds? Are there any?
General is land ownership, so that's like you basically restrict the land to that usage. So if you ever said, all right, we're going to sell this land to make money, you couldn't do it because it's locked in, kind of thing. So that is usually a concern, is like the land is then locked into CPC type of thing. What was the other half of that question, Paul?
Well, I mean that's primarily, so if I use the example of, say, we built a playground somewhere, and then we need to expand the school, and we needed to relocate that playground, so that would be a situation where that particular use of that little portion of the parcel might need to be changed. Are there any restrictions relative to those kind of things when you do something? Is there a time frame? Is there?
Yeah, the only other thing goes into accounting with the town of, do you pay in cash or do you bond? So in the case of like the high school, we're still paying off the bonds. Right. So it's like you can't do again until you pay off the bond. It's like getting a second mortgage, I guess. You got to have to pay off the first project before you do another one. That's the only other, I think, I don't know how to describe it, but like that restriction is like, if you bond it for 30 years, you're kind of stuck for 30 years in that payoff type of thing. And I don't think the fields were that. I think they were 20. Yeah.
Just a brief question about the Mendez proposal as a whole. So in the proposal thing that was given to us, it states that boardwalks would be put in along the trail. Is that the idea with, I know there are a couple of small, like, I think the 5x4, then I think 2x4 bridges that are currently in Warwood. Would it just like boardwalks replace those for the wet areas, or would it be the kind of thing where they would go all throughout the half-mile trail?
Not throughout the whole half-mile trail. If you walked the half-mile trail, you would see that, yes, there are a few bridges there that are, somebody put out a couple of boards to get over. I think the expert designing the trail would help you with this is where a boardwalk should be for environmental, wetland, et cetera, spaces. So I think you would find that there would be, having walked it, I think you would find that there are sections that need it for environmental reasons. There are sections that might want it for educational reasons. And there are sections where, why put it in? Because there's a great trail already. I think the comparable example is like the Riverwalk project. So that was a CPC project, right? So if you think about it, we built a bridge, we kept 2 existing bridges, and then put cinder the rest of the way, right? So, the environmental concerns were there of like, yeah, we need a bridge to make a connection. We need a boardwalk in a couple places, but no, we're not going to put in a half a mile boardwalk just because. Mm-hmm. So I think the expert there on the design will help you with the environmental pros and cons of various surfaces to help that.
I think it'd be good to add this to the summer retreat.
Yeah, I think let's. I guess my thought is. It's a project, the retreat, we kind of get it more into sort of this more strategic stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think it's something that at a minimum requires some sort of follow-up conversation to decide upon is it something we should be talking about at all? You know, and to me, certainly having folks from Mendez who are involved in the programming there, whether it's Jenna or others, sort of thinking about how could we use this, right? Because I think, you know, there's always interest in the community of having more trail space, but I'm not sure just having sort of a half a mile walk through the woods is what we're talking about. We're trying to talk about something that's constructive and additive to the experience of students at Mendez in particular. And so I would want to hear from them, like, how would you use this?
Right.
Right. So I think there's probably some sort of group that needs to be put together to look and think about that, and you know, we can either put it on the agenda for the 15th, although I think that agenda is going to be kind of tight, you know, or at another meeting. It's kind of sort of how close are we to actually doing something with that. So it might be that the only thing we talk about over the summer is how do we want to talk about it, right? But I'll make sure that we talk with Jim and Lori at our next agenda planning. We can figure out where to go.
But, I mean, if it sounds like, if I'm reading the room properly, it sounds like there's something we're interested in, right?
Mhm.
So maybe the first step is have Chris, Jim, and our administrative staff mull it around. They have experience working with CPC, so they're familiar with the process, and then just see what capacity they would have to engage in this, and that would probably set part of the scope
Yeah.
of, do we need to hire a project manager, or is it something that can be done through Chris's staff's capacity, right? And then,
I like the way he keeps volunteering Chris up. You're okay with that?
I keep on saying, if he has the capacity.
How detailed an application, since you've done this before, like what does the application process look like?
So I actually haven't done the application process.
Okay.
I kind of jumped in, sorry. I jumped in maybe midway through, a little bit later for the last athletic project.
Okay.
We could ask that question.
Right, yeah,
to
so
Aaron.
Yeah.
in terms of, let's say, I mean, the first phase I think would be the design phase, right? Before we'd be ready to implement anything, if we decide even to go in that direction. But what is that application process? Like, how quickly is that something we could pull together, whoever it is that pulls it together?
Yeah, so when we review an application, we're really looking for completeness of scope and expectations of unknowns. So, in other words, you know, you come to us with an application that says we need $25,000. We have 2 bids from 2 architects for $20,000, and we put in a $5,000 contingency. Okay, so all right, you've thought of the what ifs, you've gotten a couple estimates.
Okay.
Now, we have seen escalation and type of things because by the time we award it, you want to have those things in mind. So that's what like the first step of the project is, having a sense of how much it is, including some reserves for the cost, and then you actually go out through town procurement and bid it and get the specifics. So where I get the scope is, again, defining each stage. So it's a little easier to scope out design phases, to say, hey, how much does it cost to hire a landscape architect or an engineer to design this? That's pretty easy. They can come up with that pretty specifically, and they'll give you the numbers to kind of give you that ballpark. Then when you get to construction, that's a little different, but
Sure.
you get the concept there of
Right.
we're a bank, so it's like, what are you buying? You know, are you buying a 3-bedroom house, or are you buying a 4-bedroom condo? That's where we come to the approval
So
process.
is the application itself, though, you know, are we looking at like a one-page kind of summary of what you're proposing?
Yeah,
as
one page summary,
schematic,
and
or-
then estimates. How did you come up with $25,000? Where did that number come from? You know, did you just pull it out of air, or it's like, no, we got bids, we got estimates?
The narrative, and then with backup that.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the case of the
A little bit of
scoreboards, it was like, hey,
groundwork before
we've had a
we do anything.
bid, it's this. Well, I think you should add a little bit to it, because I think once you wait a year, it'll be a little more.
Sure.
Do you have unforeseen electrical components? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
things that, you know, could come up that you don't understand? Which I think you guys get, having done Mendez, of you put a contingency in. And it's one of those where, say you ask for $100,000 and you spend $90,000, it goes back, right? You know, so we put term limits on all of our projects, so they're, you know, you get 3 years to spend the money. If you don't spend it, it goes back to the town, it goes back to CPC, that kind of thing.
So I think, I mean, Paul, I appreciate your point. We could probably move it forward that way. I guess you know, as with anything that's going to involve administrative efforts, even if it's just a discussion, I'd like to make sure Jim has an opportunity to weigh in on that and how we'd want to pray. Is he, no, he's not, okay. So why don't we either put it on for the next agenda, or, you know, for sort of a very high-level discussion about whether we want to do anything with it at all at the retreat, because I don't think we're going to have a meeting after the 15th till the summer. But I will certainly talk with him about it during our next agenda setting meeting, and see what he wants to do. Maybe he'll just kind of start having some conversations to better inform all
Yeah,
of us.
and the way I was talking about is have them have a conversation and
Yeah.
then come back, and then we talk about it
Right.
after they, because otherwise we're having the same conversation we're having now
True.
if
Right.
they haven't talked, right?
Right.
Yeah.
To understand their capacity and what it looks like from their perspective. So if they do that, then we can have a more substantive
Yeah, I
directional
think that's-
conversation about what's next.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say the two suggestions from our perspective is one, who's that champion academically of like, who's going to use it? Again, idea, implementator. So who's the implementer? And then the second half of it of what else is on your radar in the next 3 to 5 years, keeping in mind that like, again, now you understand the project types. It's helpful for us to hear
Right.
this is a priority, but FYI, priority 2, 3, 4 is playground at Warren or whatever it could be.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so that we can balance those against all the other potential applicants. As I mentioned, our pool is getting bigger, but if I do my job appropriately of listening to her and hearing other things, I think I'll get more applications, and then I have a problem.
Just
So,
don't tell anybody else.
so again, I premised this as Minda's walking trail, but I thought it was important to also be in front of committees and again, just tell everybody our mission and the projects and what's coming. And so throw that on your radar as well of, I can't answer what goes in the capital projects for town and what goes in CPC, but I think you understand the difference there and how we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you, it's helpful.
Anybody else?
And I view this in kind of two ways. We want to, there's the, hey, let's make sure that our staff weighs in on usage, but even if they said, we're not going to use it, then this is a community-funded thing, and so then it's about land use, and here, if we have that, then even then, would we still sponsor and be okay with a project like this, even if it's, there's some walking trails, that it's a connectivity from that neighborhood back in Fisk and Goodnow, back down to Concord, right? So things like that. So I see it as both those things, and we want to be holistic and say, if we're going to use it, let's make sure it works for both those. And even if we're, hey, the PE teachers have no desire to use it anymore, which I can't see that, but say they said that, then it would still be something, hey, do we want to allow for this and
It's
champion?
probably a difference in sort of who the petitioner, who the driving force is, right? It's either someone within the district if it's for our purposes, but you'd probably need somebody else who really is willing to put the energy into it if it's just on our property, but not something that we're
Yeah,
driving.
that would probably, I would imagine that would, because they're still going to want us to be.
Understood, 'cause we're an
And so
applicant,
it could
right.
be just the difference between someone on Chris's staff championing it or straight out hiring a project manager for it, right?
And by the way, most of these projects I'd say are not PE driven, they're more science driven. So I think as far as educational based, yes, it's a walking trail, but I think they're more successful when they're thought of educationally, science-wise, so that it is wetland education, forest education, those type of things. That's where, that's what Needham was. That's where I grew up was. It was not a, hey, let's go out and run a mile, because I think you're kind of building that in the Mendez project out front. You're building a running track around the fields.
Our PE staff does a lot of
Okay.
events, like
Yeah.
there's Spooky
marathon,
Run back
yeah.
there. So they do leverage, they were one of the champions
Yeah.
of leveraging that. We certainly have other ways
Okay.
to, but the whole site where we have the wetlands in front and different
Right.
things. But yeah, I mentioned them just because all our kids went through and had those events.
And
that were
I
there,
will
so.
I'll just say your timeline is 5 years. I have a 4-year-old, so I'm hoping she can use the trails in 5 years.
All right, anything further for Aaron?
No?
Thank you, Aaron, appreciate you
Thank you
coming
very
in.
much.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Next item is a Clocker Club presentation, and I'll tee this up a little bit. It's Jeremy Ramsey. Disclosure for whatever it's worth, Jeremy and I have been friends for probably 15 years now, and a member of the Fisk neighborhood, right over by Mendez. And we were having a conversation a few months ago where Jeremy was sharing how he's going to be taking over as the head of the Clocker Club, and really wanted to sort of talk a little bit about what they're doing with us to make sure that what they're working on kind of aligns with school committee objectives and priorities. And so he asked if we could come in, and we had a little bit of trouble getting the schedule together, but Jeremy Ramsey's here on behalf of the Clocker Club to sort of share where they're going.
Thanks, Mark.
Jeremy?
Nice to meet all of you I don't know, and hello to everybody I do. So probably like you, when I started with the Clocker Club a little over 18 months ago, I was kind of, okay, what exactly do you do, and what does the district do, and what does the school do? So I thought I'd provide some clarity on that, our mission, maybe a little bit on our history, and then what I think could be an ongoing conversation that we could have to better align our resources. Does that sound reasonable? Okay. So the Clocker Club has been around since before 2010, but we were reorganized as the Clocker Club in 2010, but long operation. We've grown substantially. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are primarily focused on middle school and high school athletics, to what falls in between the district funding and the coach's own fundraising efforts. And I'll distinguish those a little bit in a second, just to get a little more granular so you can know exactly where we plug in. Just to give you some ideas, on average, we raise anywhere from 20 to 30,000 on our own. That's in addition to what the coaches do on their own fundraising. We have 2 major events a year, the golf tournament, which we just had, and then we have a pancake breakfast and a couple other minor events throughout the year that does the bulk of that fundraising. Just a couple examples. We just redid the scoreboards in the high school, so the Clocker Club funded that. Wi-Fi controlled, now they can operate independently. For anyone that's been to a basketball game there, that was a major generational leap in technology that we helped do there. And then tomorrow I'm announcing 2 scholarships, for example, for some of our top student athletes that the Clocker Club is funding. One of our other big purchases that we do every year is we provide all the video recording and analyzation software and equipment for all the coaches to utilize. That's a system called Huddle that's used by football, soccer, lacrosse. Basically any team that wants to utilize it has access to it. That's one of our other big purchase items that we do. So those are just some examples recently. Maybe now I can just go in a little more detail of what we do versus what the district does. So the district pays for obviously necessities for the middle school and high school in terms of uniforms, which, just so you know, rotate from high school down to middle school. There's been a lot of parent questions about that. And then they do equipment at a budget of $500 per team per season, and then busing, obviously. And at the Clocker Club level, we would support same middle school and high school, but we would do things that are multi-sport program impact. So that's one of our charters, is that it's ideally we're not funding anything that just enables one sport team or especially one gender. We would look to have impacts across as many teams as possible, and always across both sets of teams, the male and female teams. So that would include things like banners, dressing for fields, trophies, and a floating budget to support the AD. Obviously, we have a new AD coming in we're very excited about, but one of the things we do allow is the AD will have things that come up during the season that are within the funding needs that he'll go back and ask for at the district level, but they're not immediately available, but they need to be immediately purchased. So we would step in and buy those things for them, and then he or she would get reimbursed. And then where we might come in is, obviously, you're funding things at the school level that sometimes have impact directly on our sports programs. So, for example, one of the big items that we've been looking at for a long time is the weight room at the high school. That's a school property, obviously, it's a school facility, but something where, you know, we could look to potentially align together to figure out how we could put something into that to rehabilitate the weight room. That's just one example of how our paths might align. So as we move forward, one of the things that I'm trying to help with, we've had an amazing team. Peter Clay has been the president for a long time. He's done incredible work, left us in a really good position as a club. But one of the things we want to do moving forward is try to align the Clocker Club towards some bigger ticket items. It's I think one of the disconnects that we have with the parents, especially with incoming students to high school and even middle school, is they're not aware of the Clocker Club, and B, they're not really aware of what we're doing, and C, there's no tangible kind of give us this and we're going to do this that you can see, right, that you can feel and touch. Like software programming for recording videos is not something that most parents would even be knowledgeable about, and that's our largest ticket item that we have, for example. So we want to try to align around some big things where we can go out and raise more money. We want to do that with our partners, like the school committee, to say, hey, if you have something in your budget that might be a little out of reach or might be something aspirational, can we partner up and go help on our own raise some money to match to what you need to fill that gap. So that's what I have prepared.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah.
And so everybody knows, I also, when we talked before, I shared with Jeremy, a lot of the day-to-day stuff doesn't necessarily come immediately to us, right? It's through the athletic director, in partnership with Kelly at the high school, sometimes Jim's office as well. And so we talked a little bit about sort of where it comes in for us and how we'd be thinking about budget time and sort of understanding what we need in the athletic department, but knowing if we're up short on something, this might be a resource to tackle. But I wanted to, anybody has questions for Jeremy just about what the Clocker Club's doing or anything like that?
No, it's helpful to learn a little bit more about the different things that you guys have done.
So I guess the one thing, Jeremy, you didn't touch on, or you did a little bit, but I'd like you to speak to is like the fundraising events you do. Are there any that are sport specific? Like if, for example, football, there's always this 50-50 raffle. I don't even remember who puts it on, but I think it's the Clocker Club. You go to every game, you buy a ticket, and somebody wins. Are funds that are raised in a program like that at a football game dedicated to that sport, or does that just go into the Clocker Club's sort of general coffers, and then it's distributed however you guys see fit?
Oh, great question. Fundraisers like the 50-50 are actually run by that team, by the football team. So all the Clocker Club does is we would hold those funds to maintain the 501(c) status of that money, and then we distribute those funds to the coaches as they request, as they need.
Okay.
Right, so we're really the in-between of what they cannot fund or what, might be multi-sport impacted, where they wouldn't necessarily fund that out of their sub-accounts, and to what the district is not able to provide. So that's really the gap that we fill. That answer your question?
Yeah. Thank
So
you.
do you guys kind of hold little sub-accounts in essence for each team?
For every team.
Okay.
Every team. We hold their money, and then as they need it, for whatever the coaches determine they need, sometimes it's for indoor rental facilities or end-of-year banquets, those kind of things, we would then reimburse them for the cost of those items.
Is there a reason that doesn't go through the accounts in the district? And I don't understand the difference in terms of how each is used, but do the teams have accounts within the district, or is it a general athletic?
So athletics has primarily a revolving account that they have where they user fees and things of that nature and expenditures, and then we also have the general fund, which is primarily coaching salaries. The majority of that salaries and busing.
Okay. So this is just a way for them to be able to kind of have an account, for lack of a better way to present it, for the funds that they're raising, and then they can use them as they need to.
Yeah, exactly. So some of the things that would come out of the coaches fund, uniform add-ons like, say, jackets or additional apparel that that coach deems necessary that would not be there in terms of what the district could provide. Specialized equipment. So like, for example, baseball bought some very specialized training bats this season. That came out of Messer's sub-account. So that, indoor practice facilities on rain days, right? Those things would come out of their sub-account. Just some examples.
I think, as I understand it, it's the fundraising they're doing is sort of through the 501(c)(3), the Clocker Club. And then the Clocker Club, by its own books, basically says, okay, this money was baseball money, this money was soccer money, this money was whatever. And it's basically fundraising outside of the school, as opposed to if they did fundraising themselves and it was through the school system, it would be like our other gifts and donations.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Tommy?
Yeah, I just had a question about, you said your two major fundraisers for the year are the pancake breakfast and the golf tournament, right? Are those the kind of things that would end up in the sub-accounts for the certain sports, or is that just general Clocker Club budget?
Yeah, so if the only time that would go in a sub-account is if a coach or something drove some action to one of those events, then we might route some money. So for example, pancake breakfast, the football team made a donation to be raffled off. We took the proceeds of that donation and routed it to their sub-account. Otherwise, it goes into the general account fund of the Clocker Club.
And just from a logistical standpoint, you kind of commingle fundraising and things that are gifts and donations, right? So fundraising, regardless of who's doing it, still goes through our fundraising policy. So like their fundraising, because it's for the purposes of supporting the schools, would still go through, need Jim's approval and things like that, because they're still doing it on behalf of us. We only see it when it's the overnight they're fundraising for overnight travel and different other things that,
Gotcha.
Yeah, what I was thinking about is we have gifts and donations in every single event, every agenda. And so, if we had Planet 8, right, we get recurring contributions, donations from them, as opposed to folks that were wanting to donate $20 to the school department and giving it to us with the idea that, it'll be directed to athletics. This is a way that it kind of goes to them, to the Clocker Club, on behalf of the public school system athletic program. So maybe I
That was sort of my,
Yeah.
my question, that, and from my understanding, if a parent or if somebody wanted to make a specific donation to the Clocker Club earmarked for a specific team, they could do that.
Yes.
You would house it, and you would know, that parent or organization would know that money is only being utilized for the team that they denoted it to be used for.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
so I guess I have a question maybe for Chris is, and maybe this is just something we need to clean up and do. Once they expend the funds for the purposes that we talked about, that should actually come before us as a gift and donation the same way that the grants do from EFI. So if we're not doing that, we should probably be doing that. So for instance, EFI is a nonprofit as well. They do their own fundraising, and then teachers apply for grants and whatever, and then they're funded. We do see those on the gifts and donations, $5,000 for this. So I don't recall seeing that from the Clock Club. And maybe there's some reason for that. But typically, once they're expended from the external party and provided to the district should accept those.
Yeah.
And I think that the intent is that is the case and that should be happening. So I'm going to use the basketball school board as an example. I believe the last time I heard this discussion, that was when that was brought up. And I would imagine it got brought to you, and if it didn't, that was the reason that it's now in my brain that we do need to have that kind of dialogue.
But even
and
those smaller
again, as a
things,
gifts and donation.
like bats, right? If you're spending $500
Sure.
on bats, that should be a gift and donation as well, that we accept as a district. Otherwise, they're not accepted gifts from our policies, right?
Understood. Yeah,
So
that makes
maybe
sense.
that's just something we need to clean up, because we see it from other things, and this is, you mentioned all those things, and that's also a way to be visible what you're doing, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
because it comes here and it's listed, we see it from the AFI, we see it from other groups, and for whatever reason, we haven't been seeing it, and I think we should, both from a policy and visibility perspective, right?
Might be a way for us to better kind of
Yeah.
interlock, right?
Right.
Because we're tracking all that.
Right.
It sounds like, though, that a lot of times some of your purchases might be expedient in nature because either the AD says something or a coach says something. So as a board, we would kind of need to operate on the assumption that, things might be used and already kind of in the school system and not able to, like, if we ever were like, I don't know about that, like, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have
No, I
the
thi- I think-
ability to reject a
I
donation.
think there's some administrative tightening of what we do that we probably need to look at. I don't know if it came up here. I feel like I actually was at an agenda-setting meeting with Jim within the last several months, and somewhere along the way, somebody posed the exact same question that you're raising now, Paul, which is sort of like, shouldn't we be accepting that stuff? And I don't think we ever have.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, yeah.
No, I don't recall it either. And but I think that's kind of, we just need to kind of figure out the right way to operate our house on this.
Yeah.
But I think, Aaron, you raised a valid concern, which is sort of, well, if, it's, today is Thursday, and somebody needs a donation to fund an extra bus because the team went in the playoffs deeper and you guys are funding that, like, there's some urgency to that. And I think
Right.
we'd have to just think about how to manage that, because I don't think we want to get into a framework of, do what you want and then ask for forgiveness for anybody.
Right.
But there may be, I don't know what the policy says now, but it may be one of those things that, matters of expediency can be at least preliminarily approved by the superintendent, right? Because
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is as long as Jim's okay with that, I can't see us,
Right.
us saying, hey, we don't accept that, And a lot of times I think a lot of those things, the concern would be that it's maybe from some place we don't want to be. It isn't necessarily what was accepted, it's where it came from.
Yeah.
In this case, it's an established relationship, so I
Right.
think we're pretty safe there. It's more like, hey, somebody went out and there was this other organization that we don't want to be aligned with at all, providing something regardless of whether that was appropriate. That's where I think we would probably have the issue. Right?
I think there's some issues there, but probably not the ones we need to talk about with Jeremy.
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Jeremy, I
so,
do have
yeah.
another question for you. I'm
Please.
curious in terms of how you cultivate and maintain relationships with each of the coaches and all of the
Great.
different teams.
Nice.
Because there's so many of them, and obviously there are some coaches who have been well established with their teams for a long time, know what the Clocker Club does, know how to engage with you guys, and have, be able to utilize you as a resource to help them with their own fundraising and whatnot. So how do you maintain and kind of reach out to those, those teams that may not be, have that longevity of the relationship?
That's great. Thank you for teeing me up, because that's exactly what I was going to say next, is in July, for the first time, we're going to hold a coaches meeting.
Nice.
So we're inviting all the coaches to come give us their plan for their season, what they need, what they don't have, what we could help them with. That's the first time we've ever done that. It's kind of an experiment. We're going to align with the new AD on that. And so that's how we're trying to do it. Before then, or up to this point, it's kind of been ad hoc.
Yeah.
And that's been a little bit of a challenge as we go, if you don't catch them before the season, then they're obviously heads down in the season.
Yeah.
And then, to your point about things that come up, those are usually pretty small items that come up, some baseballs or this or that. They're not major purchases. What we'd like to do is get a little more planning with them. Like, what do you see next year, and maybe what do you see 2 or 3 years down the road that we could start to build some fundraising for you and, in the Clocker Clubs. One of the things that Pete started that I want to expand is he started really doing a good job of templatizing things that we do, making them kind of standard operating, but we can expand that a lot more. So, for example, each coach goes off and does their end of season banquet. Some go spend a lot of money, and they go to places, some spend almost no money and host it at their houses, right? But having a playbook for something like that and planning for what they want to do, and maybe even going as far as to help procure those locations at a reduced rate, because we're going to bring 3 or 4 or 5 teams there a season or a year versus an ad hoc thing, can help us leverage some of that. So that's what we're trying to do with the coaches.
That's great.
And I would say one of the things that, as you're talking about those kind of differences, that I've certainly heard parents express concern about, and I'm not sure that it's, sort of an issue that the Clocker Club is responsible for fixing, but is, I think, present in my mind is some sense of equity. And I'm not using that word as equity often is used on a racial basis or what have you, but at least gender potentially. There is, I think, a noticeable difference in what some teams will do compared to others. Even if it's, some teams will get an extra jacket that says Ashland Wrestling on it. The wrestling team gets that, but the girls' basketball team might not.
Yeah.
Or, and because it's coach to coach, it's not a matter of like us saying, let's do something different for this team or that. But you do have those things. And, I think it's something that I suspect will come up in discussions with the new AD, and, he'll be kind of on top of that.
And to your point, Mark, some of that's, or all of that's really just that individual coach's fundraising efforts.
Yeah.
Right? Some coaches are great, generally more established ones are great about raising money. And they plan themselves, and they orchestrate it, and they have strong team moms and dads that participate and volunteer to do that fundraising. And then at the end of the season, or during the season, they can buy everyone jackets, and they can go host it at a better facility. Nothing to do with the Clocker Club,
Right.
because we wouldn't do that if we couldn't support both sides, but just that individual coach's fundraising abilities, right? So part of what we're trying to do in that coaches meeting is say, here's some fundraising best practices, because there's some real trends that are happening in school athletic fundraising that some coaches are taking advantage of and others are not. And we have obviously a bunch of new coaches that are going to come in that we want to help educate them. Like, here's how you hit the ground running. Here's what great looks like in terms of fundraising, so we don't have those inequalities.
And also the parents, right? The parents change. So
Huge,
making sure
yeah.
that, because that's a it's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, it is.
That was my
Yeah.
question, because I'm have a rising freshman who's gonna be a 2, maybe 3 sport athlete. And so what are kind of your, from the Clocker Club, what are your expectations for parents of student athletes? And one, like, do you run the little store inside? Do you run
We do.
the snack bar?
We do
at
all the
football?
concessions, yeah.
Okay.
That's all run by the Clocker Club. And inside the high school, that concession's the Clocker Club. But we're trying to do a better job of parent outreach. So, we're coming, we did last year, and we'll do it again at the spot, is that what they call it? The
Corner spot.
Corner spot. We
Yeah.
did a booth there, kind of a pop-up stand, mostly for education. We had some merchandise, but that wasn't our primary mission, was to try to get incoming parents. So if you have ideas, we're looking for the ways that we can connect with rising freshmen, and because those are the parents we need to recruit to help the coaches do things like, fundraising and driving those activities, right?
In my head, I've already voluntold my husband to do it, so.
Yeah, just give me the
Don't
name
you worry
after.
about it.
and
There'll be it's like a parent of a senior who's going to volunteer you.
Well, I mean, just from an outreach perspective, I know, like my kids, I had one son do both winter and spring track. The other son also does spring track. But like as parents, we never got any communication from the Clocker Club. And so thinking of ways like that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I know other sports have, maybe not directly from the Clocker Club, but because there's been, a different level of parent involvement. And so, kind of thinking of using the equity term, kind of in the same way, thinking about, a blanket policy of how you connect with everybody. So it's the same across the board. And it's not just relying on, if there's a parent who may have been involved heavily in the past so they can hand it off.
Yeah, I'd like to further explore that, because
Yeah.
we're somewhat, looking to the coaches to help us, provide that access to however they see fit, but
Yeah.
maybe there's a better way to work with them to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else for Jeremy?
Aaron, on the note of parent involvement, sport to sport, with the Clocker Club and just in general with fundraising efforts, that differs greatly depending on what sport you're playing. Like if you're playing, varsity soccer with Thiago Motta, like I believe your son does, that is a lot more involvement with fundraising efforts and just general game-to-game kind of thing, and say like spring track that Cal runs. Spring track is a very hands-off kind of thing. You show up to the meets when you can, but they're 4 in the afternoon, so it's not really expected. You come to senior night if you have a senior, but that's kind of it.
Okay.
So it will all depend on what sports your kid plans to play, and even within like these sports, these involved sports, these not so involved sports, there's a spectrum of parents' involvement. Like there's going to be one parent that's going to be at every practice, at every game, taking pictures, sending them, and doing film for no apparent reason, even though we still have huddle. And there's going to be a parent that you didn't know existed until the banquet at the end of the season. And those are both totally acceptable things for parents to do. And so it's the kind of thing where you do what you feel is best for your kid, and that kind of thing, and what you have the capacity to do, right? Because
I
there's only
appreciate that.
24
I'm that
hours
mom
in
for
a day.
lacrosse right now with the camera.
And it'll be, the same person will be different, that different type of parent on one sport versus the other.
Yeah.
Depending how into the
Yeah.
kid is.
You
the
might
sport is.
not care at all about soccer, but like you could be that parent with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And one other question, because we're coming up on almost a year, I think, on the brand standardization. How is the store doing on aligning what's available for product with the brand guidance that Jim's published?
I can report back on the exact, but my understanding is we were just going through what we had, and then we were going to be following the new brand moving forward.
Awesome.
And I think don't quote me, but I'm almost sure we're through the majority of what we had.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and obviously that's still in process, so hopefully you don't,
Right.
don't
order too much.
Yes.
Don't buy in too much bulk, because
Yes.
obviously that's a work in progress. We don't want.
It's something we've been talking about, and we have a great person that she manages all that. She's been very careful about over-ordering and trying to burn through what we have, which is taking some time.
All right, anything else? Jeremy, thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming in.
This was-
Thanks for all
this
your
was,
work.
yeah,
and
informative.
So,
thank you to the Clocker Club in
If
general.
next steps, if I can understand your budget, understand those things, we'd like to pin some of, a big item that we can go after, right? Just to make it more visible.
I think a lot of that is work with Chris, because as we look at, they maintain a capital list. So that's basically what it
Yeah.
is. All the different projects, however big and small, some of it obviously will be funded more from capital, but there might be opportunities for different things in there, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and
Well, I think as you
I have
do-
the wish list, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, or at least I know what
yeah, so
the former director or Steve's looking at and what.
That's what I was gonna say, as you develop your relationship with the new AD, I think that will be a
Yes.
great place to have that conversation.
Yes, we will, yeah, we will.
And obviously, you're working with the business office on the fundraising stuff, so developing that dialogue more and making it bi-directional as far as the wish list and things like that. You look at the wish list and say, hey, we have an interest in helping with that or something, right?
I
Awesome.
think it's just generally, it's very similar to thinking about the CPC funding, right? If we're looking at our budget and we're looking at the athletics and we're hearing about needs in certain places, we should know that there's a group that might be willing to partner with us
Right.
on
Yep.
making something happen that otherwise we don't have the funding for.
That will help us with the parent involvement too, because I think
Right.
if we could come and say, we're here, we do this, but we're raising money for this big
Sure.
audacious
Yeah.
goal of redoing this,
I
right?
just want to
Yeah.
set your expectation. Coming before us isn't going to outreach to too many more people. We
No,
don't
I know.
we don't have a large viewership.
Yes. No, I understand. I meant once we have that
Set
thing.
the
I did-
expectation.
Yes.
accordingly.
But it can
It's
make
gonna
it more
drive our viewers
concrete.
all
The
those
ask is
20.
more concrete in terms of what
That's-
you're raising money for.
You're
That's
gonna
what I'm
reach-
getting to.
You're going
Absolutely,
to reach 3 more
understand.
people.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's what I'm getting to, though.
Yeah.
Once we have that, then we can have better, I think, a visual goal of
Sure.
what we're trying to do.
Just a brief question
Please.
about the outreach to both, the other coaches and, the community as a whole. Is there a person currently within the Clocker Club, I don't know, organization that has the position of like communications director, or is that something that, just like whoever decides that they want to do outreach will be doing outreach?
Yeah, we don't, it's a great idea, actually. We don't have that as a designated, elected, voted member, board
Yeah.
member. So it's a good idea.
And then one more thing about kind of outreach is also outreach, and hopefully we're going to revitalize something we did prior to COVID, is we had we organized a meeting with all of the different fundraising organizations we have in town. Because obviously, you're competing with lots of other, everybody's looking to fundraise for different things, and not only outreach to our parents for that, but also outreaching to other organizations that are similar to yours, so you can better align and not compete as much for that. And I think in general that, if one organization's wins, if you will, or
Right.
then we, as a community, we don't win because we only have a certain amount of resources. The businesses only can help just so much, and so I think that's something we hope to start to do again is get more of that dialogue between groups like yourself and other groups, so that we do it well holistically, right?
Boy, Paul, you nailed something that we've sorely missed, right? Because as I go talk to youth teams, right, Ashland youth teams, they're doing all their own fundraising, that there's overlap into the Clocker Club, even DPW, the work and rental and maintaining the facilities overlap, right? But none of us are talking, right? We're all kind of out doing our own things. It's just ad hoc conversations.
It's something, like I said, we started to try to do that, facilitate more of those conversations several years ago, and hopefully we're gonna maybe try to do that at least annually or something going forward, because I
We'd
think
love
it was
that.
real success. We had
Yeah.
a good group there, and I think it was making connections that and just making sure people are aware that, hey, we are a community and there's lots of needs and there's lots of people doing it, and at the end of the day, if you're all overlapping your timetables, you're not going to be as successful. But if you
Right.
work together on calendars and stuff like that, you're going to all be more successful, right?
And align our priorities, right?
Yep.
What we could do together.
Right.
Great.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
you,
taking
Jeremy.
the time,
Appreciate
Jeremy.
it.
Take care. All right, next item, Assistant Superintendent's update. Michael.
Yeah, briefly, great event the other day at the high school. Obviously, every year we have our reality fair. I was able to participate in that. And it really just is a wonderful opportunity for our seniors to get a little glimpse of what life might be like in a few years when they're in the working world. Congratulations to Mr. Wixer and his crew, who just do a really wonderful job putting that together. After that, we are finishing up assessments. End of year assessments are almost completed At the Warren School, our second graders are the last group to finish up with their amplified Dibbles reading data. Had the opportunity to sit with Miss Altman the other day, and it was a truly exciting conversation. I plan to present some detailed information to you over the summer regarding the growth data that we have. At that point, we'll obviously have everything and had some more time to really be able to do some real good analysis of it. But from initial viewing, our students showed tremendous growth this year, as we obviously always have that as our goal. Specifically, the majority of students did move color per se. When we move from red to yellow to green to blue, we talk about those different levels that we've presented for Dibbles. But beyond that color movement, we're looking at some students who just, every student so far has grown with their composite score, which we talked about during our mid-year data. So while I don't have that presentation completed yet due to the fact that the second grade's not done, it's really exciting to know that you're going to see some tremendous growth there. And obviously next year, we will have that implemented at the third grade level as well, as we now bring the Dibbles assessment for third grade. So we'll be having that done K-3. We are very close to making our final decision on what we're going to be using as a K-8 diagnostic assessment tool for literacy and math. We have narrowed that down to 2 specific digital platforms. Both have many great aspects of it. We're trying now just to sort of figure out which one we ultimately want to move to, but I'm really confident that both will give us the information we're looking for, specifically in the area of growth for all of our students, and it will provide us some nice vertical alignment for the assessment data that we've been sorely missing for several years. Other than that, excited for class day tomorrow. Always a wonderful day, and my favorite event, one of my favorite events of the year, is when the seniors get to walk through their schools and see their former teachers, and just a special event. And I'm so glad that our high school takes part in that, where the seniors walk through and give an opportunity for not only the teachers to see them, but also for our younger students to see them. One of the best things that happens is when an older brother walks by their little sister or their sibling, or also when a student gets to walk by a student that they babysat or coached or volunteered, and the kids see them in their cap and gown and their hugs galore. There are tons of tears tomorrow, happy tears. So I look forward to greeting my former second graders at the Warren School tomorrow when they walk through. So
you were the one that's crying, huh?
I was just gonna say, you got your tissues ready, Mike?
It's just a wonderful event. It really is a great event. So I decided I'm going to watch them at Warren tomorrow, and that will be a good moment for everybody. So it's great stuff.
Any questions for Mike?
Nope.
Wait, the replacements are for BAS and something else?
Yeah, so we're as we talked about, we spent this year looking to see what we can move towards to move away from the BAS as our primary source of assessment data for students in the area of reading. And obviously Dibbles measures phonemic awareness, but we need something that measures a more holistic literacy. And we believe that we have found that in either STAR or iReady. We will still continue to use several different assessments, as has been presented in our assessment plan. But we want to make sure that we are moving towards something that we believe is a more comprehensive assessment that is better suited for all of our students. And I think that we've found those.
Fantastic, thanks.
All right, warrant approvals. Paul?
All right, between May 19th, 2023 and May 31st, 2023, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $572,155.66. This includes general fund expenses of $431,555.34, revolving expenses of $128,000, $270.59, grant expenses of $12,247.81, and meals tax expenses of $81.92. I also signed off on $1,208,059.39 of payroll.
Thank you, Paul. Consent action, approval of minutes, May 3rd minutes. Does anybody have anything on the May 3rd minutes?
The only thing I noticed was, it includes that, you know, Ms. Tosti announced this meeting was being recorded. It was not, so I just think we should make sure that that gets taken
Okay.
out. So it's not inaccurate. That was the one that we had at the high school.
Okay, great, that was the one we did in the library before it
Right,
got right.
yeah,
Okay.
so it was not recorded, so I just want to make sure that that's
Okay, yeah, thank you, Tina.
taken out.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the minutes
As
as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
An aye for me. May 18 minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, and Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
And an aye for me. Acceptance of gifts and donations, what do we have?
We have three. The donor, We're All in This Together Incorporated, donated $136 to our student council. Dave Evans donated $1,500 for fitness equipment for the middle school fitness room. And our own Aaron Williams donated $128.45 in books to our schools, for a total of $1,795.45.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Approve the gifts and donations as presented.
All right, second?
Second.
All in favor, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Abstain.
Aye.
Aye. I don't know whether you have to, but okay.
I've always done that.
You can approve. You're not
You're allowed.
financially benefiting
That's it.
from.
That's it.
Aye.
You want the record, all right.
It's
Let the record
opposite.
reflect
You're
it was
actually
4-0.
giving, so
I know,
it's-
I just,
There's
All
no
right.
conflict.
Member updates, why don't we just go down the line? Paul, anything?
Didn't participate in the reality fair. Again, thanks to Mr. Wixer and the students that do a great job putting that on. It's great. I think one of the things that makes that really, I think, a favorite of everybody that participates is you get to have genuine conversations with so many students. It's not like the other things we participate in where you're just there and they passing by or whatever. You literally have conversations with students for potentially a few minutes at a time, and you're talking to potentially 100, 150 students. It's really just one of the favorites for everybody that participates, and so they do a great job with it. Just before this meeting, we took a 16 fourth grade girls that are part of Girl Scouts on a tour of the new Mendez School, followed by 7 third grade Cub Scouts, and so that was really fun. It's
Were
interesting.
they
to see.
excited?
It was interesting to see the different dynamics of the two groups.
Always, right?
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, no, they were really excited, and so it was really cool to that was the first large group of students to see the building,
Yeah.
aside from like my kids or somebody like that. So that was pretty cool. And I'm probably forgetting some other things, but those are the highlights.
Aaron?
yeah, so this was my first reality fair. It's never just lined up schedule-wise for me, and what Paul said is very true. I get to talk to Tommy, and what was lovely is realizing like how many kids I knew in this graduating class that were like either the older siblings or the older teammates, like on swim team or whatnot, and like, oh my God, they're graduating. And then being able to talk real with them. I was at the credit card table, and I think that's like, it's such an important, aspect of their lives. So I really did enjoy it. I don't think I mentioned it last time, but it did happen before last time. But Chris and I selected our Driscoll Scholarship recipients, so they'll get that tomorrow at class
Don't say
day.
who.
Nope. But two very, very deserving young people who wrote some really nice application essays. Yeah, that's it.
Tina?
Again, reality fair, phenomenal. It's always I was at the community service table this year, and It was really fun to have conversations with so many seniors who were excited about being involved in community service and excited to continue things that they did. So many kids in your class have worked at the farmers market and loved it so much, and so many want to continue to do that. Whether or not they will, I really hope they do, but it was really nice to have those conversations. It's, again, you know, I echo it, my favorite thing of the year to be a part of. You know, I've also been able to go, it was actually the evening of our last school committee meeting, there was both an art show and band concerts at the high school, which were both wonderful. You know, I think it was really nice to see all the kids' art showcased, because they haven't been able to do that in a while, so it was nice to have that on the same night as the band concerts. There were a lot of people around really appreciating the arts in the high school, which was really nice. I'm trying to think, the junior prom was, the Grand March was fun to watch. Everybody was having a really good time. I think it was well attended by students, by the community. And there may be something else I'm not remembering, but those are the highlights.
Yeah, the Grand March was really cool. I regret not being able to do the reality fair this year because the reality of my work got in the way. But I sort of enjoyed that in the past. So I don't have anything else. Tommy, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to share?
I participated in all of the events mentioned above. I also saw you there. You were very loud at Reality Fair. I talked to you.
You had way
you
too
were
much
quieter.
I was gonna say, you could have said he's very loud. You didn't say that in reality fair.
Give him a mic, yeah.
Little respect, little
Yeah, I
respect.
want to be somewhat polite. So yeah, that was fun. I went to the junior prom. I did that Grand March. Y'all have a lot more fun watching than the people behind. There's a lot of anxiety and foot pain that happens in the cafeteria, but it's fun. It's a good show. It's for the parents and the siblings and anyone else that is a spectator. And sometimes that gets lost in the students. But that was an enjoyable time. Reality Fair was cool. I got to engage with the students. I only heard 2 gripes, that the budgets for like what you're gonna make for 1 month of work in the future graduating college were wild. Like someone doing like environmental science work, measuring like water samples and stuff, was making like $8,000 a month, and someone working as a doctor was making $4,000 a month, and it just like didn't quite make sense. But otherwise, it was a really fun time. It was good to have those conversations. Talk to people that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten to talk to, and so that was a fun time. I graduate on Sunday, so
Congratulations.
that's the thing. I'll be replaced at the next meeting. I don't know by whom. That'll be exciting. They still have to have that election, so I don't think anyone knows by whom. Class days tomorrow. I apologize that I was late to today's meeting. We went to Six Flags. That was cool. Our bus got lost both on the way there and the way back.
Oh, well, glad you made it.
Yeah.
It's not that far out of the way.
Oh no, it's right off the pike. But yeah, somehow they managed.
There's lots of signs.
I
too.
think there might have been backseat driving by the teacher chaperone, which I won't mention names because that would be rude. But
You don't have your diploma yet. It's in these boxes right now.
I was just going to say, watch out.
okay. Yeah. So senior week's been fun. It's been a good way to cap off the year. The boat cruise was last night. That was cool too. I'm really excited to graduate. Get on with the next chapter of my life. But also I'm gonna miss a lot of the little idiosyncrasies of this town that I'm just not gonna get to experience next year.
Congratulations again. Any action items other than kind of following through? All right, Mike, you have one more thing?
Yeah, Tommy, this is just a little thank you note from us to you, so thank you very much for serving our board. Nice job this year.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy.
Appreciate
Really
what you've done.
appreciate your input and your thoughts along the way, and it's really helpful to our deliberations to stay grounded in why we're here, to hear what's going on with students and your perspective on things. So thank you. If there's nothing else, motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Second.
Paul?
Aye.
Aye.
An aye for me. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.